They're two happy women bringing you inspiring stories, politics, pop culture, and lifestyle hacks, all with an eye to making our communities and our country a better place to live. It's the Happy Women Podcast with your hosts, Jen Horn and Katie Gorka.
Thanks for joining us, and welcome to another episode of the Happy Women Podcast. I'm Jennifer Horn.
And I'm Katie Gorka.
And we're so excited. Joining us this week, Bethany Mandel is here. She is a journalist and she is a co-author of a best-selling book, which you may have already picked up. If not, you should. It's called Stolen Youth, and we want you to get that wherever you get your books. Bethany Mandel is here. Bethany, thanks so much for taking time out of your schedule. You're a busy mom. You've got 6 little ones, and there's the book right now, Stolen Youth.
I happen
We're going
to
to
have
talk
it
about that in a
literally
second,
right
but thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Now, let's start. We always like to start with your story because people don't just, poof, come to where they are overnight. Tell us a little bit about your history, your story, how you got here today.
I ask myself that question every day. Where do I start? So I grew up on Long Island. My parents got divorced when I was 3 years old. And I was raised by my mother, who was Catholic, and my dad was Jewish. So I had a very Jewish last name, Horowitz, but I wasn't actually technically Jewish, which was a weird situation. My parents both died, unfortunately, when I was in my teens. My mom when I was 16, my dad when I was 19. And I bounced around a lot. I went to Rutgers University, felt very aimless. But as I was at Rutgers, I came to the horrifying realization that even though my mother was very, very, very liberal, I might actually be an evil conservative, which was really jarring for me to realize at 19, 20 years old. I was mugged by reality in a lot of different weird ways. I took a biology class in college where I learned about, fetal development. And I thought to myself, well, that looks a lot like a person very uncomfortably early, which made me very uncomfortable as the daughter of a Planned Parenthood supporter. So when my mother died, I had a family member steal most of my survivor's benefits from Social Security, from different government sort of things that I was eligible for. And the caseworkers just did not care. There was no accountability. There was nothing. It was just kind of well, you're out of luck. And then I went on Medicaid because I was a student and I had no parents and I needed health insurance, and I qualified for Medicaid. And then I experienced Medicaid, government-run healthcare. It's not a great experience. And so all of these little data points, I went into college thinking, okay, I hate the government. In no way have they ever helped me. Quite the opposite. And I'm very uncomfortable with this whole fetus situation. And then I met a lot of different conservatives on campus, one of whom, strangely enough, as fate would have it, was James O'Keefe. We were at Rutgers the same time. We were friends. And he sort of was one of the people who got me not too much, but definitely involved in conservative stuff on campus. And then I realized all of these shifting beliefs have a name, and it's conservatism. And so I started reading more conservative theory, and realized okay, I think I might be evil. I might be conservative. So after I graduated college, the next year, after I got sort of a lowly job at a synagogue, the year after that, I moved to Cambodia, and I was living in Cambodia. And I was teaching 5th grade at a Western-run elementary school in Cambodia. And then I expanded my hatred of things to the United Nations and communism. And over the course of that year, I was watching Obamacare happen. And I took with me my experience with Medicaid and thought, we cannot expand government intrusion into healthcare. It was such a disaster for me personally. And I became very engaged on the issue and very active on Twitter, which was, a pretty new platform. And I stood out to a lot of people in the conservative movement because I was this conservative talking person who was living in the middle, literally, of the jungle in Cambodia talking about Obamacare. And that was a weird dichotomy. And a job opened up at the Heritage Foundation while I was there, and I knew I was coming back to the States. And so I applied for that job as a fundraiser at the Heritage Foundation, and I got it. And I continued tweeting, and I got a call from our communications department at my desk pretty much every day yelling at me about my Twitter account. And I remember once I rode up in the elevator with Ed Fulner wearing Birkenstocks, and he looked at me and was like, is this a plant? I don't know who this chick is, but I don't think she belongs here. And I didn't. I was not buttoned up enough for the Heritage Foundation. And so Commentary Magazine poached me after a year, and me and my husband. And so we started working at Commentary Magazine, and I wasn't smart enough for Commentary Magazine. So I wasn't buttoned up enough for the Heritage Foundation. I wasn't smart enough for Commentary Magazine, but my husband was. And so after that, I started freelancing. I had a baby. That was why I left Commentary Magazine. I had a baby, and decided I wanted to be home with her and, live my values. And so I became a stay-at-home mom almost 11 years ago. And, but I still needed that like intellectual stimulation of like, I still wanted to be saying things. I still wanted to be writing. And so I slowly became a writer, basically. And we lived off of the largesse of my journalist husband's salary. and, the money that I made freelancing was paying for Music Together classes and whatever. And so over the course of the last 11 years, I've been a freelance writer, basically.
Okay, so we have a lot of meat to get into, but before we start, on behalf of hundreds of people on X who've been asking you this question, I am going to ask you this question because I need to know the answer as well. So 4 days ago, you had a tweet where you wrote, do you know what I'm going to ask you about?
I do, because I saw you save it.
Oh, I said, I woke my husband up to tell him, I think it was only the right thing to do. What was it you had to tell him?
Oh, the Olivia Newsy thing with RFK. Yeah. That
Wait, the what?
Olivia Newsy with RFK.
Oh, that's so funny.
And
okay.
I had to wake him up. And so it was funny because
I want to wake somebody up for that. That was a good story.
I know. So it was funny because this part isn't funny. But the only time I've ever woken my husband up for news is like horrible tragedy, like October 7th. And so I woke him up and I was like, and I didn't have that in my brain at the time. And so I was like, I'm sorry. I know you're so tired. I just really needed you to tell. And I kept on talking and apologizing. He's like, I need you to get to the point. What happened? And I told him and he was like, what? And then he was relieved. And then what was amazing was he fell right back asleep. 30 seconds later.
After that, he didn't get up and start like doom searching?
No. He just
I think it's a guy thing. Men can do that.
Okay, so for some people who haven't heard, Olivia Newsy is a writer. She was writing for New York Magazine, and apparently she was sending some provocative pictures to RFK Jr., who apparently tried blocking her for a little while, but then she said she had a big story, and then he unblocked her, and then I guess he accepted the pictures. And I got to get your take on this because I am not, there are things that I like about RFK Jr. I'm a Trump girl, but there's things that I like about RFK. I like that he's a free speech guy. I felt so sorry for his wife, who took a ton of crap for supporting him and for supporting Trump in Hollywood. She was getting smashed by all of her colleagues. And now you have this come out, which can be very embarrassing. I don't know what he did or to what extent or where things go, but that was immediately what kind of made me so sad, was for her having to see all this come out so publicly, and also feeling a little upset for women everywhere in this industry who work really hard and don't have to send naked pictures to people. Is sort of insulting. So
no one wants naked pictures from me. So first of all, my kingdom for more normal people who work in politics. There's been so many stories recently where I'm like, I'm sorry, are we the only normal, boring people who are not doing shady things in their professional lives or their personal lives? I think it should just be more normal parents of 6 children living in. And I can turn the camera and show you the state of my homeschool room. But more people who are just normal, I would really like. No, I mean, it's really, it's very frustrating. And for Livia's career, I don't know how she moves on, because her entire bread and butter is like doing these deep dive profiles, and no wife will ever let her sit down with their husband ever again. And you know who I think should have taken a victory lap and didn't? Is Mike Pence. Remember the Mike Pence rule?
Excellent point.
Everyone made fun of? This would never have happened to Mr. Pence.
Open door policy.
Yeah. And he was so mocked and so
Yes.
like, how dare he? That's so sexist. It turns out that's some self-preservation that I think more journalists, or journalists too, but more politicians really should employ, because that is, to me, the lesson of all of this is Washington is a yucky place. We all know it. And you should protect yourself in that way moving forward.
Especially because it just seems like this issue, they're weaponizing it so much. I mean, look what's happening to the Lieutenant Governor, Mark Robinson, in North Carolina. You know, same treatment that poor Clarence Thomas got, Gorsuch. I mean, it's just, I don't know. It's really, really, really interesting. I am dying to talk about your book. So I don't know if you know this, but I wrote a book that just came out in April, which was kind of similarly motivated. I wrote it so I also did my time at Heritage. So I wrote it with my Heritage colleague, Mike Gonzalez. And the thing that really motivated us. So our book, what?
I love Mike.
Oh, yeah.
Deeply. For the record, it wasn't Mike who was calling me to yell at me.
Oh, I'm sure it wasn't. No, he would have been cheering. He would have been cheering you on. Yeah. No, he's great. He's a fighter. He's fantastic. So he and I kept bumping into each other in the hallway and saying, we got to talk about this. So our book is called Next Gen Marxism, What It Is and How to Combat It. But we too were very focused on what's happening to kids. So I'm super interested in your book. So your book is called Stolen Youth, How Radicals Are Erasing Innocence and Indoctrinating Children. So, I mean, I'm going to ask first the obvious question, what made you want to write it? And I'm assuming having 6 kids of your own might be part of the answer, but kind of what got you going down this path?
Yeah, so my co-author and I, Carol Markowitz, wanted to write a book together for a while. And we had very superficially observed a couple of like the SEEP issues coming into our kids' lives at school for Carol, and in media for the two of us, and books for me, and you know, movies and television shows for her. And so we initially decided, like, let's just open a Google Doc between the two of us. And I don't know if there's enough material for a book, but maybe we'll just we'll keep our eyes out, and and so we started dumping, and we had a call scheduled for the next week, and we looked at the Google Doc and we were like, there's a lot here. There's too much here. How do we put this into one book? And so what's interesting is actually, if we ever went into paperback, which we have no plans to do, but I've observed the SEEP really, really strongly in the homeschool community, which...
What?
Yeah.
Oh, no.
It's really bad.
You're ruining my world by saying that.
So a good friend of mine is writing a piece for the Washington Examiner magazine, but she's nicer than I am, and she's not naming names. But it's getting to the point with a lot of the curriculum where I'm like, Story of the World, which is something that we use, that a lot of homeschoolers use. It's like a classical. If you look at Susan Weisbauer's Twitter account and Facebook account, it is extremely problematic from our perspective. She wrote a post on her Facebook, I think it was for Memorial Day, where I'm paraphrasing it, but she basically said, it's sad that so many young people died in senseless wars and that their deaths were pointless. And I'm like, I feel like that's not a Memorial Day message. I don't think that. I think you missed the mark on that one. She denies the existence of Jews in the state, in like the land of Israel, in her books. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It's really, and so there's other curriculum that we've used in the past, that when they've edited things, and, you always want to refresh and add new books and whatever, they have rightly included more diverse perspectives. So in an American history course, you should have more perspectives about slavery and what it was like to be a Black American. But some of the books that they've chosen, I'm like, that's not quite it. And so there's a seep happening also at some of the conferences. There's a very influential woman in the Charlotte Mason community who talks about how she like is a woke educator and like full on, and that she's very prominent. She's on the board of an organization. It's bad. It's wow. There. And it's very insidious, and a lot of parents don't necessarily pick up on all of the critical theory stuff that is seeping into all of these curriculum.
This is, I mean, as Katie said, it's like kind of heartbreaking because you feel like it's the one safe space that we can have to protect our kids. And when you are, obviously, when you are Bethany Mandel, you're thinking, you're watching for all of this, but some parents are going to rely on a lot of that curriculum just to be okay. And it's not surprising because academia has been such a battleground that they've just marched through that this would be the next step to try to get to the kids. What's at the end of all of this, do you think? I mean, what's the end goal?
Yeah, I mean, I think the end goal is the reimagining of Western civilization and totally upending it. We are teaching our children that our founding fathers were all racist slave owner monsters, and that delegitimizes the entire foundation of the American civilization and our moral righteousness in this world. I mean, that's like was basically Obama's foreign policy, was that we have no moral legitimacy. And so with that, I mean, and it goes down to like the very basic building blocks of like humanity. What is a man? What is a woman? That's just not what is man. I'm sorry. That was silly. We were only asking what a man is. And I talk about that in the book, and something that that I think we will discover the unintended consequences. I'm fascinated by infant development. I think it's a really interesting field. And of course, it's all invaded by all of this ideology, and so they'll never study this. But one of the first ways that our brains, when we were infants, learned how to sort through this like flood of information that's hitting you as a newborn is to categorize. And for my children, all 6 of them, one of the first ways that they learned to categorize was, this person is a girl, this person is a boy, this person is a girl, this person is a boy. I was just in the car with 4 of my children on the way, to a drop-off program. And I heard my 5-year-old telling my 3-year-old, girls grow up to be mommies and boys grow up to be daddies. And I laughed to myself and I was like, well, that's problematic. But if we take that ability to categorize in that most basic way, biological, like it's in your brain, you can categorize female and male instantly by sight. If we take that away from children and we make them second guess that, what does that do for our brain development? We'll find out, because that's what they're doing.
So I have to ask, because a couple of weeks ago we had Megan Basham on, who talked about her book. I don't know if you've seen this, Shepherds for Sale. I thought it was absolutely fascinating because, of course, Mike Gonzalez and I had talked a lot about how so many of our institutions have been corrupted, but she actually went and tracked the money, which I thought was fascinating. Yes. She was able to show in how many very, very concrete instances either churches or pastors or conservative organizations had just been bought. Yeah. Like they had been lured with large grants from very progressive left-leaning foundations. I'm just curious, did you see any of those same type of influences? Did you look at this problem from that perspective?
Yeah. So a lot of what she discussed, you can see in the funding for curriculum, especially for the ambiguous sciences that are that they teach kids. We want to be empathetic and we want to do I'm forgetting the name of the field, but basically teaching kids how to communicate in an empathetic manner. And all of that research is underwritten by left-leaning foundations. What I found really fascinating about Megan's book was I'm Jewish, and that kind of stuff is happening in the Jewish community as well. And there has been an awakening to the dangers of DEI among the Jewish community over the course of, almost the last year, because, the Jewish people experienced the worst catastrophe since the Holocaust. And where's the United Nations? Where's women's organizations? Where's all of these places that were supported by Jewish individuals and Jewish organizations who are now completely left it swinging in the air? And a lot of it is a lot of these places have been sold out by and bought out by these left-leaning foundations. And so it's not just a problem on the Christian right. I have a group chat of a number of Christian friends, and they were abuzz talking about Megan's book. And I thought to myself, I wish she would write one about the Jewish community, because I thought there's a lot there too. But she'd probably
Maybe
just be called anti-Semitic. She'll just be called anti-Semitic.
Well, just bringing those two topics together. I mean, obviously, one of the biggest topics of this year and of the summer certainly have been all of the riots that we've seen on college campuses, the takeovers. Bethany, I guess maybe I'm too much of an optimist. I never thought that I would see people standing for terrorism, especially wearing their rainbow colored masks and their feminist t-shirts, because these terrorists would throw people off a balcony for being gay or for being a woman who's not properly covered. I mean, it's unbelievable that we've seen this kind of camaraderie with our youth, when it's clear there's a right side of this. What do you anticipate? The anniversary of October 7th is coming up. The attacks are heating up with Israel and Lebanon. Do you see an end to this? And do you think someone stronger in the White House might bring some change? Because Biden and Harris don't really know what to do with this issue. They are all over the place on whether or not to stand with Israel.
Volatility and uncertainty are everywhere we turn. Many Americans have grown increasingly tired of the reckless fiscal spending, mounting national debt, and the looming threat to the dollar. With never-ending political and global conflicts, Americans are looking for a way out of the fragile paper system and craving a trustworthy asset to help protect their savings. That's why they turn to gold, specifically a gold IRA from Augusta Precious Metals. If you have over $100,000 in a retirement account, it's time you learned about the potential benefits of a gold IRA from Augusta Precious Metals. Augusta Precious Metals is a world-class organization that prides itself on top-notch service. Ready to learn more? Get your free guide on gold IRAs today by calling 855-222-6994. Volatility is everywhere. Now is the time to take control of your retirement to secure a brighter financial future with Augusta Precious Metals. Call them at 855-222-6994 today.
Not.
Yeah, fun fact about President Biden. So over the course of Hanukkah, they were planning all of the celebrations, and they had a menorah from one of the kibbutzes, from one of the communities that were most seriously ravaged by Hamas. It's called Kfar Aza. And they had a menorah there, and they wouldn't have any hostage families there, even American citizen hostage families. A little girl was taken from Kfar Aza, who was an American citizen, and thank God she was released in October. But there's still an American who was taken, who is still in Gaza. His name is Keith Siegel. American, born and raised. He moved to Israel when he was 20-something. He's 64 now. His wife was released in November, and he's still there. And the Biden administration decided it was too political to have those families there. So I can't say that, everything would change on a dime if President Trump were president again. Have a feeling that it would be kind of like an Iran situation where he comes in and they're like, oh, just kidding. But we know what Biden is doing. We know what Harris, I think Harris would be even worse on this issue. But it was a very long time before President Biden ever said the name of one of the hostages. He said the name Hirsch Goldberg, Poland, in the Rose Garden. I think it was 9 months after he was kidnapped from the festival. And then his parents, John and Rachel, spoke at the DNC, a beautiful, moving, really just touching speech. And a week later, he was executed by Hamas, shot in the back of the head and left in a tunnel. And that was the end of his story. And that, to me, says so much about the fact that Hamas is not scared of the Biden administration, that the Bidens had his parents there, and not in response, but a week later, they decided an American life was just not valuable. And they just shot him in the back of the head and left him in a pile with 5 other Israeli hostages. So our impotence is glaring. And it's terrifying. As an American citizen, Marilyn Monroe famously said, "You can't touch me. I have an American passport." Mm-hmm. No longer the case.
Yeah, it's amazing. All right. In our last few minutes, I would love to talk about the fact that we are approaching the Jewish High Holy Days, right? I'd love to hear a little bit about what this means in the Jewish calendar. How do you celebrate? And how do you think they're going to be celebrating? Will they be celebrating in Israel?
Yeah. So this is the conclusion of a full year of holidays where, for me anyway, so October 7th happened on the end of a holiday called Sukkot. Booths is what it's called in English. And we build like a literal booth in our backyard. And my husband and I were so consumed with the war that we didn't take our booth down for like close to 2 months. So it felt like our family and our house was just like frozen in time with that still sitting in our backyard. And, every holiday that we encountered after that, Hanukkah, Purim, which is, basically people call it Jewish Halloween. It's just like a fun holiday where everyone dresses up and gets drunk. And then Passover was a really poignant one. And now we're closing the circle and we're getting right back to where we started with the start of the holidays again. And there's still 101 hostages being held in Gaza, including 5 American citizens. And the bodies of 2 other citizens who are still being held hostage as well, because they're monsters who don't just keep living Americans hostage, but dead ones as well. And so for me, it's painful. If I have a hard time thinking about the marathon of Jewish cooking that happens over the course of the next month, thinking that one of the hostages that was executed weighed 79 pounds when she was murdered. Her bones were sticking out. Her parents were able to see her body after because they wanted to see her one last time before her funeral. And she was emaciated. And so for me, it's hard to have a feast knowing that there are 101 hostages being starved to death underground still a year later. It's normally a beautiful holiday. And I voiced that on Twitter a few days ago. And I said, I'm emotionally having a really hard time with this. And a lot of rabbis responded to me personally and privately, and publicly, and said, this is the Jewish experience. Like, we fasted for Yom Kippur in the Warsaw Ghetto. Like, this is Judaism in good times and bad. And finding meaning and joy in this will be more difficult. But every holiday has been celebrated thus far in Israel over the course of the last year, and this will be no exception. Rosh Hashanah is a fun one, and Sukkot is a fun one. It's the celebration of the new year and starting to read the Torah again. We read it in its entirety over the course of a year, and we'll just keep plugging because we don't have a choice. We'll just keep going.
Yeah. And it's a testament to the strength and the will that God has given the Jewish people, that's for sure, and Israel. Okay, I know we normally would let you go, Bethany, but I have to ask you because You're a joy to talk to, and you got a lot of attention during COVID. I was in the state of California. I would not get the vaccine. I was locked down for like 18 months. No restaurants. You can't go to, I mean, kids
You should have gone to French Laundry with Gavin Newsom.
No,
you would have been fine.
He forgot to invite me, which is really odd because
Weird.
I'm sure he'd love what I have to say about him. But take us just real quick, because you got a lot of notoriety because you were one of the leading voices speaking out about these COVID lockdowns as they were happening. I think there are a lot of people who in retrospect go, oh, we should have said a little more, but you did. Why was that such an important lesson for us to learn about what this government can be capable of if we let it?
Yeah. So it was, I did get a lot of heat in my private life as well. There were people who literally never saw us again. Like that was harder than, my name trending on Twitter was members of our family who never refused to ever see us ever again. Completely cut off, which was very difficult.
Wow.
It was, I was, the only regret I have is that I wasn't outspoken enough. I started saying, this maybe isn't a great idea in like May, but in March I was like, we should shut everything down. Let's just get it. And that was a mistake. That was, and you know who was right? Was Jesse Kelly. Jesse Kelly from the jump was like, And weirdly, another person who was right, who he would never say it now, is Bill de Blasio. Bill de Blasio, New York City was one of the last large school districts to close.
He fought it. Yeah.
He fought it because he said, if I close the schools, I don't know how I get them open again. He was right. He was right. And my co-author and I pushed to have those schools closed, and turned out Bill was right. And Carol and I both around May of 2020 said, something's got to give. We know at that point we had 4 or 5 months of data, including coming out of China, of like, this is really only hitting the super elderly and really people who have a lot of pre-existing conditions. But all of our risk analysis cannot and should not be the same. And a theme of our book that fit in very well with COVID was that kids' needs were considered last. They did not care about what was doing right by children. And also it was a very elitist perspective on public health. And, that's what happens when you have people who are running the CDC and NIH and all of these school districts who grew up rich and who grew up around rich people and then went to rich schools. I grew up in literally a trailer park with a single mom. And I thought to myself, if I grew up now, I would be so screwed. I never would have logged on to Zoom. And I thought about kids that I grew up with that like the teacher wouldn't have caught an abuse situation or a neglect situation because teachers are mandated reporters who have the most access to children on a day-to-day basis. And that abuse would have not been caught. That drug addiction would have gotten worse. My father was a drug addict. And so I had the lived experience of knowing that like being able to lock down is a privilege. We never hear check your privilege anymore. That was a privilege that was not shared by the majority of Americans. And we watched elites shut everything and everyone down. And now we're learning after the fact, oh, Gavin Newsom went to French Laundry. Oh, Nancy Pelosi got her haircut. And now this past week, Steven Crowder broke the fact that the czar in New York City was having parties. And I have a child who's within earshot who would understand. But parties that you would not want anyone... Your priest wouldn't be at those parties.
Correct.
Well, hopefully not.
Maybe.
I don't know. But parties that are a public health violation in themselves.
Yeah.
Where you can get monkeypox, maybe. I'm just saying.
that, which nobody wants, by the way. They're doing all these diseases recirculating right before the election again. Everything needs to stay away. It's great to chat with you. And we so appreciate all the stuff that you do and for not being afraid. And we'd love to have you back anytime. You're absolutely fabulous. Get her book right now. Bethany Mandel is here. The book is called Stolen Youth. You can get it wherever you get your books. And again, we really appreciate all your work, Bethany Mandel. Thank you so much. And thank you all for joining us. Speaking of books, don't forget to get Katie's. It's called Next Gen Marxism. You can get that wherever you get your books. And you can check her out online, katiegorka.org. You can also search for her on Facebook. Just look for Catherine Gorka, or on Twitter, Gorka Katie. You can find me. I'm on social media too. Jennifer Horn Radio on Instagram and Facebook, and Jennifer Horn on Truth and on X. And we always appreciate those 5-star reviews. Share us with your friends and connect with us on all of our platforms, SalemPodcastNetwork.com. Thanks for joining us. It's another episode of the Happy Women Podcast.